All right, we welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is a show where we profile a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. In each episode of this show, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning, as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest on our show. Today's guest, Nikhil Kurhe, is somebody I've known for a long time. We were in school together in Bahrain. But a little bit about his background before we jump into this conversation about his journey. Nikhil is a 28-year-old based out of Pune, India. Nikhil is a proud cat dad, plays hours of badminton weekly, a voracious reader, and he's extremely curious around all things human behavior, decision making, game theory, and generally around what makes us tick and the world tick. He loves going to bed with more questions than answers on a daily basis and is a self professed generalist and is a computer science engineer by education. So his educational background is in the field of computer science, but he has expanded to include a lot of areas in this category to reach where he is today. Since 2019, though, Nikhil has been building an open data company called Finarcane, and they've been instrumental in building, scaling, and driving adoption for the next wave of India's public digital infrastructure around open finance, health, and identity. As the co founder and CEO of Finarcane, Nikhil now wears multiple hats, and each new day brings a new learning experience. So, Nikhil, thanks for that wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to talk about your current venture, but I'd like to start this conversation off by actually going back in the day. What was Nikhil like as a student at school? What were some of the subjects you were interested in, and what were some of the memories you have from school?
Hey, Avi. Glad we are finally doing this, and thank you for that intro. Uh, that was amazing, awesome. So how was Nikhil like in school, right? So, a couple of points. First of all, I probably shifted schools every 3 or 4 years.
Mm.
So I've been in school in Surat in India. I've been in schools in Aurangabad again in India. I've had a couple of my formative years in Saudi in Yanbu, and funnily enough, I just spent 1 year, I think less than a year actually in Bahrain.
Wow.
So I was there just for 11th grade, and yeah, and then I ended up doing 1 year in Pune, and then I've been in Pune since from 2012. So yeah, I've just moved around a lot, initially during my school years, and it's I back then I had some resentment around it because I would see people, people like you obviously who've been in the same place, pretty much same school all your life, and you have a amazing sort of social circle, and you essentially end up having a reset every time you sort of shift cities, states, countries, continents, right?
Yeah,
So
moving around can be challenging, as you mentioned, but I think it also gives you the skills to understand and build social relationships in every new context. It's just like moving a new job. The fact that you were able to move to new countries and make those changes, I think it's amazing, and it speaks a lot about your ability to adapt and change based on the needs of the situation. But, how did you decide to choose computer science as a subject you wanted to study? After 11th and 12th, you directly moved into studying an engineering degree. So, what was your thought process behind making that decision?
yeah, so the probably the cliched answer is I've always been big into computer gaming and all of that, but really what clicked was as early as I think seventh or eighth grade. We actually had a programming at a school, in Aurangabad, right? And logic was something that really clicked for me. I was I really enjoyed math, and but I knew that even as early as eighth grade, I try to just skip ahead a bit and try to understand that if I really want to double down on math long term, what would that look like? And I knew that math, middle school, even calculus, and all of that is great, and probably something that I will ace. But the curve is extremely exponential once you get into graduate or graduate mathematics, and if you really choose to double down there. And I knew I would probably be out of my depth. And so computer science, when I formally had it as a subject from eighth grade, really seemed like a cheat code of sorts, where I could still hang on to math while finding somebody else to do do the heavy lifting, while I just provide the logic of it, right? And folks who enjoy solving, say, puzzles, or just a bunch of logical things, I think it's a great career option. And honestly, not everyone is built for it. You can have mediocre programmers getting by, making a decent living, and just riding it out also, right? And that's okay. But if you're really passionate about it, it's an amazing opportunity. And as we can see, clearly technology is eating the world. So that's essentially was my first sort of exposure to computer science, and I just kept on doubling down on it. And so when I graduated from high school, it seemed like a no-brainer going for computer science.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think that's so important that you were able to make that insight and make that connection at such a young age, in terms of distinguishing between core math and maybe looking at a more applied discipline in terms of computer science being your area of expertise. But like, what do you learn in a 4-year computer science course, Nikhil? Just to give the viewers a little bit of an understanding of your training as a computer engineer. Like, how is the course structured and how is that broken down? And how did those skills that you learned in that course, how did they help you in your professional journey? So if you could just tell us how the course is broken down to start off with, that would be great.
Okay, so it's been a while since I've been back to college, and I graduated in 2016. So let me give you an overview of what I remember, right? So you start with a foundational layer of sorts on the first year, which gives you exposure to multiple sort of engineering subjects, everything from electrical to even civil, and a couple of other branches. And then subsequently the other 3 years is where you really specialize, including in the final 2 years you also have a couple of electives and specialization choices, and ability to go for industry internships, right? So it's a, depending on obviously the university you end up at, it can be a very hands-on or a very hands-off approach. But the beauty of at least for computer science, is that honestly, even even the best of professors in computer science probably have content, including their lectures, their lessons, all available online. And really you'll find amazing tutorials and content to pick up on computer science. It's probably one of the most accessible fields to dip your toes in. But conversely, like the curve of distribution is very steep. And what I mean by that is going from entry level computer science to really somebody who's decent at it, to somebody who's absolutely great at it, to like somebody who's a savant. The gaps are just really massive. So therefore, what your engineering experience, and I'm talking about the Indian context here,
Yep.
because that's what I can comment on.
Yeah.
is that the at least back when I was in engineering, the content was the course content was fairly outdated.
Mm-hmm.
What is expected once you get out there and in the industry versus the concepts that we were learning, where there was a mismatch there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it was back then, and since then the universities are taking efforts to actually periodically revise their curriculum and actually get industry inputs. So that's shaping up well. So here's how you should expect an ideal a 4-year course. It should have sort of 3 or 4 core things.
Mm-hmm.
One is you need to get the fundamentals of thinking in a logical manner, right? And that's something that is very difficult to teach. I would say, and it's not something that like I've heard a couple of people who I respect and admire and who've done great in the field. Talk about things like you're either born with it or you're not, and I do not think that's really fair. I believe there's a spectrum, and everyone is going to have a level at which they top out essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's okay. There are opportunities at each of those stages. But point is, that's the one thing you should try to nail. Your basics of logic and ability to think in an efficient and an optimized manner.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I won't go too technical, but the one of the ways you measure um, how well have you say programmed is what is known as space and time complexity. So again, it sounds obviously complex, but I'll break it down. Space complexity is essentially how much space is the code you're writing really going to take to execute or solve a given problem.
Mm-hmm.
And space is clearly a constraint for us.
Yeah.
We buy phones with limited storage, and so ideally, when you write efficient code which takes up less space, that is good, right? So that's one core concept.
Mm-hmm.
And the other core concept is what is known as time complexity. And again, the idea here is how quickly can your program run, how quickly can the code you're writing actually solve the problem that you're looking to solve. So these are the sort of this is the other basic that you really should try to nail in your college.
Got it.
And lastly, programming by nature, especially during your college, is should be a collaborative experience. Everyone around you is going to be at different stages, but you should definitely collaborate and try to help each other out. And things like pair programming, where two people sort of program together, is now catching on the broader industry, but it was always an option, right? And I would strongly recommend that that's the other thing you should really go for. Otherwise, just work. Sorry, just just one last thing. You should get internships and real world experience. Ideally in your college if you can, because again, in the Indian context, what you learn inside the classrooms versus just the paradigm in the industry was misaligned when I was in college. So that's the last step.
Yeah, that's amazing, Nikhil. I think you summarized it so well. And I think for anyone that's interested in making a career in this field, you actually gave them like a small cheat code of some of the things they need to really understand to be able to get the most out of that course. And I think what you mentioned about the amount of knowledge you learn in the course and the amount that is required by the industry, there's a huge gap. I feel like technology in general is one of those industries where And computer science in particular is one of those industries where knowledge is changing on a day-to-day basis, right? You have new languages, new ways to program coming out almost every day. And I think as someone that is working in the field, I assume you have to be on top of these developments on a day-to-day basis. So it's interesting that you share those observations that are so important in the context today. But Nikhil, once you were done graduating your course, there are two pathways for anyone with a degree like yours. Take up a really high-paying job in the tech industry as a working professional, or also look at the entrepreneurial pathway in terms of other opportunities. I feel like how did you navigate that path? Were there professional experiences you took up, or was it Finarkian right from the start for you?
Yeah. I so funnily enough, I actually wanted to go for a master's in the US. I applied in my third year of engineering. I didn't get any of the admits, not one admit, right? And second time around, after my graduation, I applied once more. I got a couple of admits, but for whatever reasons, I felt I deserved better.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the universities, that I was getting accepted into, and so I decided to wait a year out. But what ended up happening was that because I was so confident that I will get into the university of my choice. I never really attended any of the university placement opportunities. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a job after I graduated for about a month or so. And that's when the final sort of university I was waiting out for responded with that you do not make the cut, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I really started looking for a job. But again, what helped me was that I'd done an internship in a company, prior during my engineering,
Mm-hmm.
and so I reached out to those folks, and because they'd already worked with me, and they'd seen my work, I luckily got an opportunity to go for an interview, and that really came through for me,
Got it.
right? So that's essentially how I ended up, working in a business intelligence kind of company here in Pune for the next 3 years, from 2016 to August 2019.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing, and I think that opportunity. It's interesting, because a lot of people also look at higher education as an opportunity. But I think working in an actual company and organization can be an education in itself, right? And I think it also helps you observe how your skill can be translated into the real world context and applied in a particular market like area. So, like, was it this time where you were observing different trends in the industry, and like what was the service that this company was providing, without naming names? What was like the main service, and how did you make that transition from working in an organization to observing that there is something that you can create on your own that may be really valuable in a larger context? Because I'm really interested in your entrepreneurial journey, Nikhil. Like, what is the thought process behind taking that leap, and how do you observe problems that can be solved, and how did you find that gap as an entrepreneur?
Right. So let's take it from essentially how I sort of ended up here, right? And just dialing it right back to after my college, and joining my first job. So I ended up joining one of the best teams there, where the smartest, I mean, there are smart people all around, but just folks who are working in the data engineering and sort of data science team at this company is where um, I ended up joining. And my first realization, when I met them, was that I used to think I am a fairly adept programmer, and these guys just blew me out of I felt I was way out of my depth.
Yeah.
And but you ultimately grow into the kind of company you keep, right? I think that's really where getting into the right university helps. It's the kind of network you sort of come across, right?
For
But
sure.
yeah, so going back to my company. So this is where in this team eventually I met folks who ended up being my co-founders, right?
Uh,
So all senior people, older than me, from a couple of years to much more,
yep.
right? And yeah, so that's essentially where I met my co-founders, and while the company was doing something very different in a domain, you know that's that's more around manufacturing and aerospace and very different sectors,
Hmm.
but obviously it dealt with data. And yeah, so that's where I sort of met these guys. and
Amazing.
and what I saw was that they had a lot of pent up creative energy,
Got it.
and you know uh, outlet was very much needed.
Interesting.
And so that's where I joined a couple of these guys, and we would just have these hacks or hackathons kind of experiences where we will just get together and just look at interesting problem statements beyond our day job, and try to understand what we can do about it, right? And
That,
so
yeah.
so that's essentially the origin story more or less.
That's amazing. Like, two things I'm noticing from your story, Nikhil, is that you reached out to people in your field that were much more competent or had so much knowledge about that, and that sort of transferred onto your development. It actually increased your learning curve significantly because you were looking at someone like beyond your extended university peers. You were also looking at professionals that spent a long time in the field, and I think that was really helpful for you. But also the space where all of you were bouncing ideas off each other would have been a really creative breeding ground for possible ideas because all of you had a lot of technical expertise, and you had five or six brains working on the same problem, which could have led to a lot of interesting conversations and results. So in a few sentences, Nikhil, tell me what Finarkin does as a company, and what are some of the services you offer for someone that is just listening to this for the first time.
Sure. So before we get there, just very quick background. In 2017, October 2017 also, or rather in September 2016, RBI, the India's central bank, essentially came out with one last sort of circular slash communication under the governor, Mr. Rajan,
Hmm.
and that was essentially what sort of laid the framework on the foundation for open finance initiative,
Hmm.
right? And so we'll dive into each of these terms. What is open finance, open data, and all these specifics. But fast forward to November 2017, RBI's IT team came out with the first, or rather the first sort of mainstream revised version of the specification. So you can think of it this way, that um, taking that circular from 2016, RBI's IT arm came out with a protocol, or a blueprint of sorts, as to how we would enable open finance in India, right?
Hmm.
And that's really when we got hooked, and I tried to figure out who are the people who are driving this initiative, and can we help out, and how can we contribute, and that sort of led us down that entire path, right? So now let's fast forward a couple of years,
Hmm.
and let's talk about what we do as a company, right?
Sure.
So Finarkin does two things. One is we continue to build out a lot of these protocols. So a protocol is like a blueprint of say, it's a series of steps, or instructions as to how do you go about, say, doing a particular task. This
Mhm.
task can be exchanging of data, it can be communication, it can be something around security, cyber security, right? Some of the common examples that we use every day includes, say, HTTPS, right, which is a protocol on our browsers, on our
Mhm.
websites, or we use the internet protocol IP, right?
Mhm.
Literally, this is what is, or right. So these are a bunch of protocols, and something similar was built around open finance, right?
Mhm.
What is open finance? Open finance is a all encompassing, it's an all encompassing sort of term for technologies to enable sharing of financial data
Mhm.
from, say, manufacturers of financial services to other manufacturers and say entities who want to use this data.
Mhm.
And again, let's break that down also. A manufacturer of financial service would be, say, a bank. A bank offers you a checkings account or a savings account, or it can be investment company like a Fidelity or something,
Mhm.
or it can be an insurance company, or it can be a Robinhood, right? So these are manufacturers, and then subsequently on the other end, entities where you want to, say, use this financial data. So
Mhm.
when do you typically use financial data? It's probably when you are looking for, again, financial service, right?
Got
So
it.
either you're looking for a credit, you're applying for a credit card, or you're looking to finance a car, or a bunch of things, right? Or it can be personal finance. You want to know where you're spending,
Mhm.
and just staying on top of your finances. Or it can be something around applying for a new insurance policy. It can be filing your taxes. You have to share a bunch of documentation, when you, say, file your taxes every year, right? So this is the idea here is that historically financial data was siloed with each of these manufacturers,
Mhm.
and open finance is how you lay a blueprint for seamless exchange of this data.
Got it.
Um, and and what India's protocols are doing very uniquely different, which is not done pretty much anywhere else in the world, is that um, there is a neutral third party consent manager of sorts,
Mhm.
where we can explicitly manage just our data consents, like
Interesting.
where have I shared my financial data,
Okay.
and ability to subsequently um, you know, uh, just manage my consents, and be aware of where I'm sharing my data, revoke it if I want to, if I stop using a service, why should that service keep having access to my data, right?
For sure.
So all of these things, is what the Open Finance Protocol in India enables. And I hope that wasn't a too technical answer.
No, that was great, Nikhil. I think you did a great job just summarizing how this data can be used in so many beneficial ways for not only the manufacturers of those services, but also for other entities that may benefit. But I think the important point you mentioned is consent, right? The customer knowing how that data is going to be used and having a say in that relationship. I think that builds an ethical conversation around sharing of data across stakeholders. And I feel like that is a very positive step. And I think creating the protocol with those ethics in mind, I think sets the norm for what this can be. And I think it's amazing that your team is sort of pioneering this approach for open data and open finance. But I think your protocols will also fall into other industries like open health or open education, in open logistics, and so many other ways. So I feel like it's amazing that you're able to do that through your work as a startup and a company. But Nikhil, I know there are two other podcasts where you go into depth about how Finarcane is doing this, and I highly recommend to the listeners that that is something you should listen to follow up this conversation. Nikhil is also available on social media platforms to speak to about his work with Finarcane. Just in terms of in respect to time, in addition to Finarcane, like you've been a close observer of the Indian technology sector. Are there any other entrepreneurs or other startups you feel are doing interesting work that you are inspired by? And anything that you have noticed about the tech sector in India or in the world in particular that is standing out for you in terms of the larger horizon?
Yeah, so there's a company called Postman which does really great work. I mean, it's a massive company now, but it's a developer tool essentially, and but what really gets it's both something that drives me and also something that I think is changing very rapidly, is that we come across a lot of these memes or forwards around you know uh, persons of Indian origin sort of running big tech, but sort of no big tech in India, and most of the Indian sort of mainstream startup companies have been sort of tech enabled services, right? Or like ed tech or e-commerce or and don't get me wrong, these are massively difficult problems, and they've built amazing technology and they're obviously solving critical problems, but I strongly feel that the kind of technical talent India has, and uh, big tech companies from India, run by Indians, building for the world, is happening.
Amazing.
And there are a couple of companies out there. I'm sure your listeners have heard of Zoho. Again, that's amazing example of what um, the team behind Zoho has been able to achieve. So yeah, these are sort of like the companies that, and there are plenty of other examples. There's a Pune sort of based company called Dhruva. Again, they're doing great work around cloud security. So you are getting these deep tech and pure tech sort of plays now coming up, and yeah, and like you mentioned, technology pretty much goes through a churn every 2 to 3 years, if and definitely a decade down the line, everything just changes, and a key enabler has been just the fact that the one metric that has really got optimized is a computing power, right? So because of what is known as Moore's law, every couple of years or so, we've been able to really shrink the processor dice.
Got it.
So again, without getting too technical there, what that enables is, it enables us to do more with more efficiently with lower power consumption,
Mm-hmm.
and it's essentially every time you buy an iPhone, it has a new chip. It is actually built on like a new technology, and it's like smaller and it's shrinking, and it just enables more efficiency. So while the battery size necessarily sort of stays the same, you end up getting more performance out of the same size sort of phone, right? So that's been sort of one enabler. The other enabler has been with the advent of cloud technology, something like AWS or Google Cloud, or Microsoft's Azure platform. The cost to build a new technology and rapidly deploy it and scale it has become very affordable. You do not need to buy bulky servers or a lot of hardware infrastructure. Anyone who can, anyone, even a one person, you can easily set up a one person, software company with a decent recurring revenue of even a few million. If, and it's entirely doable by one person today, right? That's essentially what's been driving this entire wave.
That's amazing, Nikhil. I think that's a great positive note to end this conversation. I think there's so much more I'd like to chat with you about. And I feel like I know you've done other podcasts where you've broken it down in more detail, but I really feel that is a good vision, for technology and not just the developed world, but even in developing countries. I think more startups need to be, bred and completely run in countries like India, China, Indonesia, Brazil. And I feel like uh, because we have so much talent in countries around the world, not everyone needs to move to a particular geography to actually get access to those opportunities. And I feel like with your story, you are actually enabling and creating that path. That I think by building like a software company and making it what it is today, I think you have showed that it is possible to build ecosystems and networks in an environment that has that talent. And I think I'm really excited for your journey, Nikhil. I think Finarkin's doing amazing work. I hope I'm able to have this chat with you again in the near future. But for the listeners, please do follow Finarkin and Nikhil on all available social media platforms. I will be linking some of Nikhil's other podcasts and some articles related to Finarkin in the show notes. But Nikhil, any final words before we end the conversation today?
Um, yeah, I would like to end on, you know, just be curious, right? There, you know, there are a lot of inefficiencies in the world around us, and just be open to being curious, and acknowledging them. Not you don't need to go out and solve everything,
Yep.
but just take a moment and just admire that, and yeah, so that's what I would love to end on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nikhil. And for the listeners, stay tuned for more such episodes from this show. And until then, keep learning.